Sir, Mommy can't walk, the little girl begged, and the vampire king carried her out of the dark alley. Rain hammered the cobblestones of Blackmore's old quarter with relentless fury, turning narrow streets into rivers of shadow and storm. Lightning split the bruised sky, illuminating crumbling brick facades and neon signs that bled crimson and violet into the flooding gutters. The wind carried the scent of wet iron and distant thunder, curling through alleyways where even the bravest mortals dared not tread after dark. Lucian Valtor walked those streets alone. Hi, my beautiful family. Thank you for sticking around with me through our trying times. I really appreciate your love and support. We're finally back again to give you many more beautiful stories. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. At first glance, he looked like a man, tall, silver-haired, impossibly beautiful beneath the obsidian crown that rested against his temples. His embroidered coat, black threaded with crimson, clung to his frame, soaked through but ignored. Rain cascaded over his pale skin, dripping from the sharp line of his jaw. His eyes, cold and crimson, betrayed nothing. Behind him, two shadows moved in perfect silence. Ravik Thorn and Sullen Crest, his night guards, kept their distance but remained vigilant. They had walked these streets with him for centuries, watching their king patrol a city that both feared and worshipped him. Lucian barely noticed them tonight. Centuries of rule had dulled the edges of his existence. Nights blurred into endless repetition, court politics, blood contracts, the tedious maintenance of power. He walked to remind himself his kingdom still existed beyond marble halls and velvet thrones. Then something small collided with his boot. He stopped. A tiny hand, trembling and desperate, clutched at the hem of his cloak. Lucian looked down. A little girl stood before him, drenched to the bone. Her maroon dress clung to her shivering frame, her blonde hair plastered against her tear-streaked face. In one small fist, she clutched a soaked teddy bear, its button eyes reflecting the street lamp's dying glow. She looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes that shimmered with something more dangerous than fear. Hope. Sir. Her voice cracked, barely audible over the roar of the storm. Mommy can't walk. The words hung in the air between them. Lucian stared down at her, unmoving. Behind him, Ravik shifted, hand drifting instinctively toward the blade at his side. Your Majesty, Sullen murmured, his voice low and warning. We should move. Mortals are not our concern. But Lucian wasn't listening. Something about the child held him frozen. The desperate trust to her eyes, the way she clung to his cloak as though he were her last hope in a world that had already abandoned her. He knelt slowly, obsidian cloak pooling in the rain-soaked street. Water seeped through the fabric, but he didn't care. For the first time in decades, something stirred beneath the ice that had long since encased his heart. Where is she? He asked softly, his voice carrying a weight that made even the storm seem to pause. The little girl didn't hesitate. She grabbed his hand, her tiny fingers ice-cold against his skin, and pulled. This way, she whispered. Please, she won't wake up. Lucian glanced back at his guards. Ravik's expression was grim, disapproving. Sullen's hand remained on his weapon. Both knew this was a mistake. Involvement with mortals brought complications. Attention. Danger. But Lucian was already moving. The girl led him into a narrow alley behind a shuttered pawn shop, where the rain fell even harder, where the only light came from a single flickering bulb above a rusted fire escape. The shadows here were thick, oppressive, the kind of darkness that swallowed sound and hope alike. There, the girl whispered, pointing with one trembling finger. Lightning cracked the sky. In that brief, blinding flash, Lucian saw her. A woman lay slumped against the brick wall, rain pouring over her unconscious form. Her long blonde hair was tangled and soaked, clinging to her pale face. Her white blouse, now translucent from the storm, clung to her frame. One arm lay limp at her side. The other rested weakly across her lap, as though she'd try to keep herself upright before collapsing entirely. Her lips were pale. Her breathing was shallow. But it wasn't her fragility that stopped Lucian in his tracks. It was her scent. Beneath the rain, beneath the fever burning through her veins, there was something else, something ancient, forbidden, achingly familiar. It wrapped around him like a half-remembered dream, pulling at memories he'd buried centuries ago. Magic. Old magic. Rowan magic. Mommy. The little girl rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside the woman. She grabbed her mother's limp hand, pressing it to her cheek. Please wake up. Please. Lucian approached slowly, every instinct screaming at him to walk away. He brushed the wet hair back from the woman's face, his fingers grazing her feverish skin. Her eyes remained closed. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath his touch. She should have been nothing to him. Another mortal casualty in a city full of them. Another life burning too brightly, destined to flicker out before dawn. But she wasn't nothing. She was impossible. Your Majesty, Ravik's voice cut through the rain, sharp with urgency. We need to leave.
Now.
If anyone sees, let them see, Lucian said quietly. Without another word, he slipped his arms beneath the woman and lifted her as though she weighed nothing at all. Her head lolled against his chest, rain streaming down her face. She was burning with fever despite the freezing storm, her body trembling even in unconsciousness. The little girl grabbed onto his cloak, her small fingers gripping the fabric with desperate strength. You'll help her? She whispered, voice breaking. You won't let her die? Lucian looked down at the child, at her tear-streaked face, at the fierce, stubborn hope that refused to let go. Something cracked inside him. No, he said, his voice rough. I won't. He turned and began walking back toward the street, the unconscious woman cradled in his arms, the little girl clinging to his side. Rain poured over them in sheets, turning the alley into a river of shadow and light. Behind him, Ravik and Solon exchanged a glance, one that spoke of consequences neither dared voice aloud. Mortals who passed them on the street stopped and stared. Whispers began immediately, spreading like wildfire through the storm. The Vampire King, carrying a human woman, a child walking beside him without fear. What does this mean? Lucian ignored them all. His focus remained on the woman in his arms, on the impossible scent of her blood, on the faint glow he could now see pulsing beneath her skin, a pattern he hadn't seen in centuries. A pattern that should not exist. The little girl looked up at him, rain streaming down her face. My name is Mira, she said softly. And that's my mama. Her name is Alara. Lucian's steps faltered for just a heartbeat. Alara. The name echoed through his mind, pulling at threads of memory he'd thought long severed.
He didn't know this woman. He was certain of that.
But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Hold on, he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to the woman, the child, or himself. Just hold on. The royal carriage waited at the end of the street, black lacquer gleaming even in the downpour. Solon pulled the door open, expression unreadable. Lucian climbed inside, still cradling Alara, and settled onto the velvet seat. Mira scrambled in beside him, never once releasing her grip on her mother's hand. As the carriage lurched forward, Lucian wrapped his coat around Alara's shivering form. Her fever raged beneath his touch. Her pulse remained dangerously weak. But beneath it all, beneath the rain and fever and fear, that impossible aura continued to pulse. Rowan blood. Living. Breathing.
Real.
And if she truly was what he suspected, then everything was about to change. The journey to Valtor Castle took less than 20 minutes, but to Lucian, it felt like an eternity. In that time, Mira told him everything, how her mother had been sick for days, how they'd been running from strange men who watched them from the shadows, how Lara had collapsed in the alley and wouldn't wake no matter how hard Mira begged. With every word, Lucian's suspicions deepened. This was no accident. Someone had been hunting them, and now, fate had placed them directly in his hands. The carriage interior was a study in shadow and crimson, dark wood paneling carved with ancient symbols, velvet upholstery the color of fresh blood, and the faint scent of iron and incense that clung to everything Lucian owned. 2 oil lamps swayed gently from brass hooks, casting flickering light across the confined space. Alara remained unconscious in Lucian's arms, her head resting against his chest. Mira pressed close to her mother's side, one small hand gripping Alara's fingers as though afraid she might disappear. Rain drummed against the roof in a relentless rhythm. Lucian shifted slightly, adjusting his hold to keep Alara steady as the carriage swayed. He pulled his coat more securely around her trembling form, feeling the fever radiating through the fabric. Her breathing was shallow, labored, each exhale a struggle. Sullen, he called through the narrow window slit that connected to the driver's bench. "Your Majesty?" came the immediate response. "Take the hidden gate. Eastern approach. No main roads." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken concern. Understood. The carriage changed direction, wheels clattering over uneven cobblestones as they veered away from the public thoroughfares. Lucian knew what his guards were thinking. Bringing mortals into the castle, especially through secret entrances, would not go unnoticed. Questions would be asked. The council would hear of it by dawn. He didn't care. "How long has your mother been sick?" he asked quietly, his gaze shifting to Mira. The little girl looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. 3 days, she whispered. Maybe 4. She kept saying she was fine, but she wasn't. "She's never fine." "What do you mean?" Myra's lower lip trembled. "Mama works all the time. 2 jobs. Sometimes 3. At the factory in the morning, then the restaurant at night. Sometimes she cleans offices after that." Her voice cracked. "She never eats enough. She gives me her food and says she's not hungry, but I know she's lying." Lucian's jaw tightened. He'd ruled for centuries, seen countless mortals struggle and suffer, but hearing it from the mouth of a child, spoken with such matter-of-fact resignation, struck something deep within him. "We live in a small apartment," Mira continued, her words tumbling out now as though a dam had broken. "It's cold most of the time. Mama says we can't afford the heating bill. And there are men." She hesitated, fear flickering across her face. "What men?" Lucian's voice sharpened. "Strange men. They watch us sometimes. Mama pretends she doesn't notice, but I see her looking over her shoulder. She walks faster when they're around. Last week, one of them followed us home. Mama made me hide in the closet while she—" Mira stopped abruptly, her eyes going wide. Lucian's gaze had shifted, just for a moment, and his irises flared crimson, reflecting the lamplight with an inhuman glow. The instant Myra's fear spiked, something strange happened. The oil lamps guttered violently, flames shrinking to pinpricks. The temperature in the carriage dropped. Shadows deepened in the corners, pressing inward as though responding to the child's terror. Then, just as suddenly, the flames surged back to full brightness, brighter than before, bathing the interior in warm, golden light. Lucian's eyes returned to their usual cold, pale gray. He studied Mira carefully, noting the way her breathing had quickened, the way her small hand now glowed faintly where it touched her mother's skin. The child didn't seem to realize what she'd done. Interesting, Lucian thought. Very interesting. He filed the observation away, keeping his expression neutral. "You're safe now," he said gently. "Both of you." Mira nodded slowly, though she didn't look entirely convinced. The carriage began to climb, the road steepening as they ascended toward the castle. Through the rain-streaked window, Valtor Castle emerged from the storm like something conjured from nightmare and legend. Gothic spires pierced the bruised sky, their peaks crowned with wrought iron gargoyles that seemed to shift and writhe in the lightning flashes. Stained glass windows, depicting ancient battles and forgotten gods, glowed with internal light. The castle loomed over Blackmoor like a dark sentinel, ancient and immovable, carved from black stone that drank in shadows. "Is that where you live?" Mira whispered, pressing her face to the window. "Yes. It's big." "It is." The carriage pulled into a hidden courtyard accessible only through a narrow archway concealed by overgrown ivy. Guards stationed at the entrance stiffened as the door opened and Lucian emerged, still cradling Alara in his arms. Their eyes widened. Whispers began immediately. "Not a word," Ravik growled, stepping between the guards and his king. "To anyone. Am I understood?" The guards nodded quickly, but Lucian could see the questions burning in their eyes. By morning, the entire castle would know. He carried Alara through shadowed corridors lit by torches that never seemed to fully illuminate the stone walls. Mira hurried alongside him, her wet shoes squeaking against the polished floor. They descended a spiral staircase into the castle's lower levels, into the infirmary wing where healers kept their workshops and apothecaries. Two vampire healers looked up sharply as Lucian entered, their pale faces registering shock. "Your Majesty." "Stabilize her," Lucian commanded, laying Alara gently on a stone bed covered with linen sheets.
Now.
The healers moved with practiced efficiency, examining Alara's pulse, checking her temperature, and pulling back her eyelids. But as they worked, one of them, an older woman named Corva, froze. "Your Majesty," she breathed. "Look." She pulled back Alara's sleeve, revealing her forearm. Beneath the pale skin, faint luminescent patterns glowed, delicate lines that formed the unmistakable shape of a rowan tree, its branches spreading across her veins like roots of light. The second healer gasped. "Rowan sigils," he whispered, then immediately caught himself, his eyes darting to Lucian. The temperature in the room dropped. "You will stabilize her," Lucian said softly, dangerously. "You will not feed on her. You will use no blood magic. You will tell no one what you've seen here. Am I clear?" Both healers bowed their heads. "Yes, Your Majesty." Outside in the corridor, Ravik and Solon stood in tense conversation. "If the council finds out," Solon began. "They will find out," Ravik interrupted. "Half the castle guards saw him carry her inside. By dawn, this will reach the council's ears. And then, Ravik said grimly, there will be consequences." Inside the infirmary, Corva approached Lucian cautiously. Mira had curled up in a chair beside her mother's bed, finally succumbing to exhaustion. "Your Majesty," Corva murmured. "The fever, it's not natural." Lucian's gaze never left Alara's face. "Explain." "Her life force is being drained. Slowly. Deliberately. Someone has been siphoning her vitality for weeks, perhaps months. It's a very old form of magic. Very dark." Lucian's hands curled into fists. "Can you stop it? I can slow it. But whoever casts this, they'll know the moment we interfere. They'll know she's here." Silence stretched between them. Lucian stepped closer to the bed, studying the glowing patterns beneath Alara's skin. His mind raced backward through centuries of memory, to a bloodline thought eradicated, to a family destroyed in fire and shadow, to bodies bearing these exact same marks. "I've seen this before," he whispered. "On the last of the Rowan line. Before they were exterminated." Corva's face paled. "Your Majesty, if she truly is..." "Then someone will come to finish the job," Lucian finished, his voice cold as winter. "And when they do, I'll be waiting." Morning light filtered through stained glass windows, painting the guest chamber in shades of amber and crimson. Mira woke slowly, her mind foggy with exhaustion and confused dreams. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw the room. It was enormous, larger than their entire apartment. The bed she lay in was a four-poster draped in heavy velvet curtains the color of midnight. Carved wooden furniture surrounded her, a wardrobe taller than any man, a writing desk inlaid with mother-of-pearl, chairs upholstered in silk. Through an open doorway, she glimpsed a washroom with a porcelain tub and polished brass fixtures. Everything was beautiful. Everything was wrong. "Mama?" Mira whispered, pushing back the covers. Silence answered. Panic surged through her chest. She scrambled out of bed, her bare feet hitting cold stone floor, and ran to the door. It opened easily. She wasn't locked in, but the corridor beyond was a maze of shadows and flickering torchlight. "Mama," she cried louder now. "Where are you?" Her voice echoed off ancient stone walls. Footsteps approached from somewhere distant, growing closer. Mira backed against the wall, tears streaming down her face. A figure appeared at the end of the corridor, tall, imposing, dressed in dark armor.
Sullen.
He stopped when he saw her, his stern expression softening slightly. "Easy, little one," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You're safe. Where's my mama?" Mira sobbed. "I want my mama." Solon knelt, bringing himself to her eye level.
She's resting.
"The healers are caring for her. Would you like to see her?" Mira nodded frantically. Without another word, Solon lifted her into his arms, carefully, as though she were made of glass, and carried her through the winding corridors. A maid followed at a respectful distance, carrying a tray of food. They descended into the infirmary wing where Alara lay unchanged. Her skin was still pale, her breathing still shallow, but the fever seemed less intense than the night before. The glowing patterns beneath her skin had faded to barely visible tracings. "Mama," Mira whispered, climbing into the chair beside the bed. She grasped Alara's limp hand, pressing it to her cheek. "Please wake up." Alara didn't respond. Solon gestured for the maid to place the food tray on a nearby table. "You need to eat," he said firmly. "Your mother would want you to stay strong." Mira shook her head stubbornly. "Not hungry, Mira. I'm not eating until Mama wakes up." Solon sighed, exchanging a glance with the maid. Neither wanted to force the child, but she hadn't eaten since before the storm. Hours passed with no change. Mira remained curled in the chair, refusing all attempts at coaxing. Finally, near midday, the door opened again. Lucian entered, still dressed in the formal attire he'd worn through the night. He looked tired, though vampires rarely showed exhaustion. There was something weary in the set of his shoulders. He carried a silver tray bearing warm bread, honey, and sliced fruit. "I hear you're being stubborn," he said, setting the tray down. Mira didn't answer. Lucian pulled up a chair beside her, a gesture that made Solon's eyebrows rise, and sat. For a long moment, he simply studied the child. Her tear-stained face, her defiant posture, the fierce way she clung to her mother's hand. "I had a sister once," he said quietly. "She was about your age, maybe a little younger." Mira glanced at him, curiosity momentarily overriding grief. "She was impossibly stubborn," Lucian continued, a faint smile touching his lips. "Refused to eat bloodfruit because she said it looked like tiny hearts. Our mother tried everything, threats, bribes, elaborate stories. Nothing worked." "What happened?" Mira whispered. "I told her bloodfruit grew on trees that only bloomed under moonlight, and that each fruit contained a wish from the stars." He paused. "She ate them after that. Every single one." "Did the wishes come true?" Lucian's smile faded. "Some of them." Mira was quiet for a moment then. "Is your sister still here?" "No," Lucian said softly. "She's been gone a very long time." Something in his voice made Mira reach out and touch his hand, a brief, tentative gesture that seemed to startle them both. "I'm sorry," she said. Lucian stared at her small hand resting on his, then gently pushed the tray closer. "Will you eat now? Your mother will need you strong when she wakes." Mira hesitated, then nodded. She picked up a piece of bread and nibbled at it slowly. Lucian watched until she'd eaten half the tray, then quietly excused himself. Outside the infirmary, Ravik waited, his expression grim. "We need to talk," he said. They moved to a private alcove where stained glass cast colored shadows across their faces. "The staff are talking," Ravik said without preamble. "Word has spread about the mortal woman and child. Some of the older nobles are calling it a violation of protocol." "Let them talk," Lucian replied coolly. "It's more than talk. You know the law. Mortals cannot reside in the inner keep except as registered servants or blood donors. Royal exceptions require council approval, which you don't have." "I'm aware." "Then you know they'll demand an audience."
"Soon."
Lucian's jaw tightened. "I'll deal with the council when the time comes." And if they demand you surrender the woman and child, they won't. How can you be certain? Because, Lucian said quietly, they don't yet know what she is. Later that afternoon, Mira wandered the corridors while Alara slept. A young maid had been assigned to watch her, but the girl was easily distracted, and Mira slipped away unnoticed. The castle was a labyrinth of stone and shadow. Mira turned corner after corner, each hallway looking identical to the last. She passed grand chambers with doors standing open, revealing libraries filled with ancient books and armories lined with weapons that gleamed in torchlight. Then she turned down a corridor that felt different, colder, darker. The torches here burned with blue flame instead of orange. The air smelled of old magic and decay. At the far end, an iron gate barred further passage. Beyond it, stairs descended into absolute darkness. Mira stopped, suddenly afraid. A figure moved in the shadows near the gate, tall and hooded, its face hidden. Lost, little one? The voice was soft, almost gentle, but something in it made Myra's skin crawl. I was looking for the infirmary, she stammered. The figure glided closer, not walking, but gliding, as though its feet never touched the ground. Such wasted power, it whispered, more to itself than to her. Burning so brightly, yet untrained. Uncontrolled. Dangerous. Who are you? A friend. Or perhaps an enemy. Time will tell. The figure tilted its head. Does the king know what you are, I wonder? Before Mira could respond, footsteps echoed from behind. The figure melted into the shadows, disappearing as though it had never existed. Solon appeared moments later, his expression thunderous. What are you doing here? This wing is forbidden. I got lost, Mira said, her voice small. There was someone, a servant most likely.
Come, now.
He led her back through the corridors, his grip on her hand firm but not unkind. Mira glanced back once, but the shadowed corridor remained empty. That night, Mira sat beside her mother's bed, watching the slow rise and fall of Alara's chest. The rhythm was hypnotic, comforting, until it wasn't. Alara's chest stopped moving. Mama? Mira whispered. Nothing. Mama. Panic flooded through her. She grabbed Alara's shoulders, shaking her. Wake up. Please. The candles around the room flared violently, their flames stretching toward the ceiling. A glass medicine bottle on the nearby table exploded, shards scattering across the floor. The temperature plummeted, and frost began spreading across the windows. Alara's chest hitched, once, twice, then resumed its steady rhythm. The candles returned to normal. The healers rushed in, their faces pale with shock. Corvus stared at Mira, then at the shattered glass, then back at the child. Rowan abilities, she breathed. Latent but powerful. Reactive to emotional distress. The other healer nodded slowly. The girl is more than human. Much more. Far above, in his private library, Lucian spread ancient texts across a mahogany table. Maps of old bloodlines. Genealogies written in fading ink. Crests and symbols that hadn't been seen in centuries. He found it on the third scroll, the Rowan family crest, identical to the pattern glowing beneath Alara's skin. Beside it, a notation in archaic script. Lightbearers. Bound to the throne by blood and oath. Protectors of balance. Hunted. Exterminated. Lucian's fingers traced the symbol, his mind racing. If Alara was Rowan, then Mira was a lightbearer, a child prophesied to wield magic capable of destroying or crowning kingdoms. She wasn't just valuable. She was dangerous. And if the council discovered the truth, they would demand her surrender. Or worse, her destruction. Lucian closed the scroll carefully and locked it in a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf. Not yet, he whispered to the empty room. They don't need to know. Not yet. But deep down, he knew time was running out. The summons arrived at sunset, delivered by a messenger dressed in the formal crimson and black of the High Council. A single piece of parchment, sealed with blood-red wax bearing the mark of the 7 founding houses. Your presence is required. Council convenes at the 10th bell. Attendance is mandatory. Lucian read it once, then tossed it into the fireplace. The parchment curled and blackened, consumed by flames. They didn't waste time, Ravik observed from the doorway. No, Lucian agreed. They never do. 2 hours later, Lucian descended into the heart of Valtor Castle, into chambers most mortals never knew existed. The council hall was ancient, carved from a single massive cavern deep beneath the castle's foundation. Torches lined the curved walls, their flames casting dancing shadows across stone that had witnessed centuries of blood and politics. 7 stone thrones formed a semicircle at the chamber's center, each occupied by a vampire whose age was measured in centuries. They represented the oldest bloodlines, the most powerful families, the foundations upon which the vampire kingdom had been built. And every single one of them saw Lucian as either a tool or a threat. Lucian entered through the main archway, his obsidian crown catching the torchlight. He wore formal court attire, black embroidered with silver thread, a cloak that trailed behind him like liquid shadow. Ravik and Solon flanked him, hands resting on sword hilts. The council watched in silence as he approached. Lord Darius Vex spoke first. He was younger than most of the council, barely 4 centuries old, but had risen quickly through cunning and ruthless ambition. His pale hair was pulled back in an elaborate style, his smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Your Majesty," he purred. "How kind of you to join us." "I was summoned," Lucian replied coolly. "Not invited." "A technicality." Darius gestured lazily. "We've heard troubling rumors. Whispers that you've taken mortals into your personal chambers. A woman and a child, hidden away like secrets." "I rescued them," Lucian said. "During a storm patrol. The woman was ill. I provided medical assistance." Lady Corvina, eldest of the council, leaned forward in her throne. Her face was a web of fine lines, her eyes milky, white with age. "Mortals do not belong within the inner keep. You know the law as well as any of us. The law allows for temporary medical intervention." "Temporary," Lord Theron emphasized, his voice like grinding stone. "It has been 3 days, Your Majesty. 3 days during which you've kept them sequestered, refused visitation, and violated every protocol regarding mortal contact." Lucian's jaw tightened. "The woman remains unstable. Moving her would be dangerous." "Then bring them before us," Darius suggested smoothly. "Let the council's own healers examine her. Surely you have nothing to hide." The challenge hung in the air. Lucian met Darius's gaze and held it. "I will not parade a dying woman and her child before this council for your entertainment. Medical privacy supersedes political curiosity." "Medical privacy?" Darius laughed softly. "Or are you protecting something else?" "Careful, Darius. I merely question your judgment, Your Majesty." Darius rose from his throne, circling slowly. "You risk exposure of our kind for 2 mortals. You defy centuries of tradition. You refuse council oversight. One might wonder where your true loyalties lie." Lucian's eyes flashed crimson. The temperature in the chamber dropped. "My loyalties," he said quietly, dangerously, "have kept this kingdom stable for 2 centuries. I don't recall you contributing anything beyond poison words and political scheming." Darius's smile didn't waver. "I serve the kingdom's interests, as do we all." "Then trust that I am doing the same." Lady Corvina raised a skeletal hand. "Enough. Your Majesty, the council requires assurance. Either grant us access to examine these mortals, or remove them from the castle grounds within 48 hours. Lucian stared at her. Around the chamber, the other council members nodded in agreement. "You forget yourselves," he said softly. "I am not your servant. I am your king." "A king who serves at the pleasure of the founding houses," Lord Theron reminded him. "A king whose power derives from our collective support." "Then withdraw it," Lucian challenged. "Call for a vote of no confidence. See how many houses stand with you." Silence stretched taut as a drawn blade. Finally, Lady Corvina spoke. 48 hours, Your Majesty. After that, We will take action with or without your cooperation. Lucian turned and left without another word. Ravik and Solon followed, their hands never leaving their weapons. Behind them, Darius watched with a satisfied smile. In the infirmary wing, the younger healer, a thin vampire named Marcus, waited until Corva had left for the night. Then he slipped into a storage room, locked the door, and pulled a small mirror from his robes. He whispered an incantation. The mirror's surface rippled like disturbed water, then cleared to reveal a hooded figure. "Speak," the figure commanded. "She's here," Marcus said quickly, nervously. "A Rowan descendant. Living, breathing. The marks are unmistakable." A long pause. "You're certain?" "I've seen the sigils myself. And the child, she exhibits power. Untrained, but potent. The king knows. He suspects. He's guarding them closely." "Good," the figure said. "Very good. You'll be rewarded for this information. Continue observing. Report any changes. And if the council demands access, let them try. The chaos will provide opportunities." The mirror went dark. Marcus tucked it away, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't know who he was truly serving, only that the gold had been generous and the promises even more so. Lucian returned to the infirmary near midnight. The castle was quiet, most of its inhabitants either hunting or sleeping. He dismissed the guards stationed outside and entered alone. Alara remained unconscious, her breathing steady but shallow. Mira had fallen asleep in the chair beside her mother's bed, her small hand still clutching Alara's fingers. Drool had dried at the corner of her mouth. Her teddy bear lay forgotten on the floor. Lucian stood at the foot of the bed, studying them both. He could send them away. Find a safe house in a mortal city, hire guards, provide resources. It would be easier, simpler, less politically complicated. But he'd seen the strange men Mira mentioned. He'd smelled the dark magic laced through Alara's illness. Whoever was hunting them had been patient, methodical, willing to drain Alara slowly rather than kill her outright. They wanted something from her, from them. Outside these walls, without his protection, they would be found within days, maybe hours. Inside, surrounded by potential enemies and political rivals, they were still vulnerable, but at least he could control the battlefield. Lucian made his decision. "Ravik," he said quietly, knowing his captain waited just outside. "Solon." Both entered immediately. "From this moment forward, no one enters this infirmary without my explicit permission. Not healers, not servants, not council members. No one." "Your Majesty," Ravik said carefully, "the council has given you 48 hours. I don't care what the council demands. These two are under my protection. Anyone who tries to take them will answer to me personally." Ravik and Solon exchanged glances, then nodded. "Understood. And find out who's been asking questions. Someone is feeding information to outside parties. I want to know who." "We'll start immediately," Solon promised. Lucian turned back to Alara and Mira, something tightening in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation he couldn't quite name. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered, "whatever it costs." High above, on a balcony overlooking the infirmary courtyard, a cloaked figure listened to every word. They smiled in the darkness, then slipped away through secret passages only the oldest residents knew existed. By morning, Lord Darius would know exactly where the mortals were being kept, and exactly how to reach them. Alara woke to the sound of bells. Deep, resonant chimes echoed through stone corridors, marking midnight in a place she didn't recognize. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to dim candlelight that flickered across vaulted ceilings carved with intricate patterns. Heavy curtains, velvet, the color of dried blood, hung from posts surrounding the bed where she lay. This wasn't her apartment. This wasn't anywhere she knew. Her body felt strange, invigorated, somehow, despite the bone-deep ache that radiated through her limbs. Her skin tingled as though electricity ran just beneath the surface. She tried to sit up and gasped. Needles were embedded in her arm, connected to tubes carrying clear fluid. Then memory crashed over her like a wave. The storm. The alley.
Collapsing.
Myra's terrified face. Mira. Alara's voice cracked with panic. She ripped the needles from her arm, ignoring the sting and the blood that welled up. The room spun as she stumbled out of bed, her legs threatening to give out. Mira. Mama? The small voice came from her right. Alara turned, nearly falling, and saw her. Mira, curled up in a smaller bed pushed against the wall, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Relief flooded through Alara so powerfully it nearly brought her to her knees. She stumbled to Myra's bedside and dropped down, pulling her daughter into a fierce embrace. You're okay. You're okay. I'm okay, Mira murmured against her shoulder. The king said you would wake up soon. Alara froze. The king? The door opened. Lucian entered as if summoned by her words, tall, imposing, crowned even in the middle of the night. His silver hair caught the candlelight, his pale skin almost luminescent against the black of his formal attire. His eyes, cold and gray, fixed on her with an intensity that made Alara's breath catch. She instinctively pulled Mira closer. Lucian stopped several feet away, reading her fear. You're awake, he said quietly.
Good.
The healers were beginning to worry. Where am I? Alara demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. What is this place? Valtor Castle. You collapsed in Blackmore's old quarter 4 nights ago. Your daughter found me and asked for help. 4 nights. Alara's mind reeled. She'd lost 4 days. I remember the storm, she said slowly. And the alley. But after that. You were dying, Lucian said bluntly. Fever. Exhaustion. Something darker beneath it all. I brought you here to stabilize you. Alara studied him, trying to reconcile the monster from human rumors with the man standing before her. The vampire king was supposed to be cruel, merciless, a creature of nightmare. Yet he'd saved them, sheltered them.
Why?
What do you want? She asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. Why help us? Lucian's expression didn't change. Because your daughter asked me to. And because I don't ignore fate when it presents itself so clearly. Fate, Alara repeated. That's a convenient answer. It's the truth. Are we prisoners?
No.
Then we can leave? Lucian hesitated, just for a heartbeat, then nodded. When you're strong enough. Though I wouldn't recommend it. Why not? Because whoever was slowly killing you is still out there. And leaving my protection would make you easy prey. The words landed like stones. Alara's arms tightened around Mira, who had gone very still. What are you talking about? Alara whispered. Before Lucian could answer, Corva entered, followed by the younger healer, Marcus. Both bowed slightly to Lucian, then approached Alara with cautious expressions. Lady Rowan, Corva began. My name is Alara Blake. Corva exchanged a glance with Lucian. Of course. Forgive me. Alara, then. You've been very ill. We need to explain what we found. Alara listened, her face growing paler with each word, as the healers described the curse woven through her blood, dark magic that had been draining her life force incrementally over months, maybe years. Minor injuries that should have healed quickly had instead become conduits for slow death. Someone has been hunting you, Corva said gently, methodically. Patiently. That's impossible, Alara breathed. Who would? Why would? Your blood carries an ancient pattern, Marcus interrupted, then seemed to catch himself. A unique signature.
Rare.
Valuable. Lucian's eyes narrowed slightly at the healer's hesitation, but he said nothing. Alara looked down at her hands, turning them over as though seeing them for the first time. I don't understand. I'm nobody. Just a waitress. A factory worker. There's nothing special about me. Your mother never told you? Lucian asked quietly. Alara's head snapped up. Told me what? About your family. Your bloodline. Alara's voice faltered. I never knew my father. My mother refused to talk about him. She always said we had to stay hidden, that there were old debts we couldn't repay. We moved constantly when I was young. Different cities, different names. She died when I was 17, and I thought. She swallowed hard. I thought it was over, that whatever she was running from had died with her. Clearly not, Lucian said. Alara's hands trembled. She looked at Mira, who was watching her with wide, worried eyes. What does this mean? What am I supposed to do? For now, rest, recover. Lucian's tone softened slightly. You're safe here. Both of you. I give you my word. The word of a vampire king, Alara said, a bitter edge to her voice. Forgive me if I'm not immediately comforted. Something flickered in Lucian's expression. Offense, perhaps, or grudging respect. Your daughter didn't seem to have trouble trusting me. My daughter is 6 years old, and yet she survived 4 days in a castle full of vampires without a scratch. Lucian stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. I could have drained you dry that first night, could have let you die in that alley, could have taken your daughter and erased every memory of you from her mind. I did none of those things. So yes, Alara Blake, trust my word, because it's all that stands between you and the things that hunt you. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken tension. Finally, Alara looked away. Thank you, she said quietly, for saving us, for taking care of Mira. Lucian inclined his head slightly. She made it easy. Mama, Mira said suddenly, her small voice breaking the moment. The king tells good stories, and he let me sit with you every day. And Solon taught me a card game. And Mira, Alara laughed softly, tears pricking her eyes. Slow down. But Mira was already launching into detailed accounts of her days in the castle, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. Alara held her close, stroking her hair, letting the familiar sound of her daughter's voice anchor her to reality. Lucian watched them, something shifting in his chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in decades. It unsettled him. I'll leave you to rest, he said abruptly. The healers will check on you regularly. If you need anything, tell the guards outside. He turned to leave, but Alara's voice stopped him. Lucian. He looked back. Why do you really care, she asked. About us. About any of this. Lucian held her gaze for a long moment. I don't know yet, he admitted, but I intend to find out. He left before she could respond. After the door closed, Alara settled back against the pillows, Mira curled against her side. She felt exhausted again despite having just woken, the weight of revelation pressing down on her. She reached up to brush hair from her face and froze. There, along her inner wrist where the healers had treated her, a faint pattern glowed beneath her skin, delicate lines forming the unmistakable shape of a rowan tree, its branches spreading like veins of light. What did you keep from me, Mama? She whispered to the memory of her mother. What am I? Outside the door, a shadow lingered in the corridor, listening. Then it slipped away into darkness, carrying every word back to those who waited. The new guest suite was almost obscenely luxurious. 2 connected chambers, one with a canopied bed large enough for both Alara and Mira, the other a sitting room with plush furniture, a writing desk, and windows overlooking the storm-gray city below. Tapestries depicting ancient forests hung on the walls. A fireplace crackled with warmth. Fresh flowers, night blooms that only grew in moonlight, sat in crystal vases. This is too much, Alara said as Lucian showed them inside. It's practical, he replied. The infirmary is no place for a child to live. This suite is easier to guard. The adjacent chamber houses my personal guards. You'll be safer here. Alara wanted to argue, but couldn't deny the logic. She also couldn't deny the way Myra's eyes had lit up at the sight of the room, already exploring every corner with childish delight. Thank you, Alara said quietly. Again, Lucian nodded and turned to leave, but Mira called after him. Will you come visit? He paused in the doorway. If you wish. I do, Mira said firmly. You promised to finish the story about the bloodfruit trees. Something softened in Lucian's expression, so briefly Alara almost missed it. Then I will. Over the following days, a strange routine emerged. Alara recovered slowly, her strength returning in increments. She spent hours watching Mira, marveling that her daughter seemed so at ease in this impossible place. The castle staff, vampires who should have been terrifying, treated Mira with surprising gentleness, bringing her treats and showing her hidden alcoves where centuries-old treasures were stored. And Lucian visited daily. He came in the evenings, usually bringing some small gift, a book of fairy tales, a carved wooden horse, once an ornate music box that played haunting melodies. He would sit with Mira in the sitting room while Lara watched from the doorway, unsure whether to join them or maintain distance. Tonight, he brought a set of carved stone animals, a wolf, a raven, a stag, and a fox, each no larger than Myra's palm. "This is an old game," Lucian explained, arranging them on the low table. "Each animal represents a different strategy. The wolf is strong. The raven is cunning. The stag is graceful. The fox is adaptable." "What do they do?" Mira asked, fascinated. "You choose one, and it tells you how to face challenges. For instance," he held up the fox. "If you were lost in a forest, the fox would remind you to look for hidden paths, to be clever rather than forceful." Mira giggled and picked up the raven. "I want to be clever too." Lucian's lips curved into something almost resembling a smile. "A fine choice." Alara found herself smiling too, despite everything. Watching them together, the ancient vampire king and her 6-year-old daughter, felt surreal. Yet there was genuine warmth in Lucian's voice when he spoke to Mira, a gentleness that contradicted every rumor Alara had ever heard about him. It confused her, unsettled her, made her wonder who he really was beneath the crown and the reputation. Outside the castle, Ravik moved through Blackmoor's shadows like a ghost. He'd spent 3 nights investigating the city's underbelly, questioning informants, bribing tavern keepers, following threads that led to dead ends and darker alleys. Finally, in a basement beneath a shuttered apothecary, he found what he was looking for. Shadow Coven, his contact whispered, a nervous vampire who owed Ravik several debts. They trade in rare bloodlines. Rowan blood is worth a fortune, has been for centuries. If someone's hunting a Rowan descendant, it's them. "Where do I find them?" "You don't. They find you." The contact shuddered. "They have eyes everywhere, even inside the castle." Ravik's jaw tightened. "Names." "I don't have names. No one does. But I've heard whispers. Someone high up is feeding them information." Inside Valtor Castle, Solon pored over ledgers in the archives, tracking financial irregularities. Payments that didn't match services rendered. Gold transferred to unnamed accounts. Small discrepancies that painted a larger picture. Someone on the council was funding outside operations. Someone was preparing for something. Alara wandered the castle halls during the day, while Mira napped. She told herself she was exploring, learning the layout in case they needed to flee. But truthfully, she was restless. Her body felt different now, stronger, more aware. Sounds were sharper. Colors are more vivid. Sometimes she could swear she felt emotions emanating from the stones themselves, as though the castle were alive. She passed through a corridor lined with ancient carvings, symbols she didn't recognize but felt drawn to. Without thinking, she reached out and touched one, a spiral enclosed in a circle. Warmth flooded through her fingertips. The symbol flared briefly with golden light, then faded. Alara jerked her hand back, heart pounding. She glanced around, but the corridor was empty. She touched another symbol, a tree with spreading roots. The same warmth, the same light. "What's happening to me?" She fled back to the suite, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. She told no one, afraid that revealing this strange ability would make her even more valuable and therefore more dangerous to those who hunted her. But the truth was she was changing. Something inside her was waking up. That night, screams tore through the castle. Lucian was in his chambers when he heard Myra's terrified cries. He moved with inhuman speed, arriving at the guest suite seconds before Alara could reach her daughter. Mira thrashed in her sleep, tears streaming down her face. No, don't take her. Mama. But it wasn't just the nightmare that made Lucian freeze. Mira was floating. Her small body hovered 6 inches above the mattress, suspended by invisible force. The chandelier overhead blazed with light, too bright, unnatural, and that light seemed to be pulling toward Mira, coalescing into a glowing orb above her chest. Mira, Alara rushed forward, but Lucian caught her arm. Carefully, he warned. Don't startle her. The power is reactive to emotion. Together, they approached the bed. Lucian spoke in a low, soothing tone.
Mira.
You're safe. You're dreaming. Come back to us. Alara took her daughter's hand, squeezing gently. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. No one's taking me away. Slowly, Myra's eyes fluttered open. The light dimmed. Her body lowered back to the mattress. The orb dissolved like morning mist. She blinked groggily. Mama, I'm here. Alara pulled her close, stroking her hair. Just a bad dream. But over Myra's head, Alara met Lucian's gaze. His expression was grave. We need to talk, he said quietly. Tomorrow. Privately. Alara nodded, her heart heavy with dread. After Mira fell back asleep, Lucian remained for a moment, watching the child. Lightbearer, he thought. Just as the prophecies described. Power awakening through fear and love. She was more dangerous than even Alara realized, and more valuable than any treasure in his vaults. Far beneath the castle, in chambers sealed by ancient magic, Lord Darius met with a figure cloaked entirely in shadow. Between them, an enchanted mirror reflected the conversation back to distant listeners. The gathering is in 3 nights, Darius said. Security will be focused on the main halls. The wards near the eastern wing will be temporarily weakened. And the Rowan woman? In the guest suite adjacent to the king's chambers. The child with her. Perfect. The cloaked figure's voice was silk over steel. When we move, it must be swift. The girl is our priority. Her blood, her power. The woman is secondary. And my reward? The council seat you've always wanted. Support from every shadow coven in the kingdom. The king's authority, undermined beyond repair. Darius smiled. Then we have an agreement. The mirror went dark. In his study, Lucian stared at the ancient text spread before him, debating. He should tell Alara everything about the Rowan line, about Lightbearers, about the dangers she and Mira faced. She deserved to know. But knowing would terrify her, might make her run, and running would get them killed. He needed more proof, more time, more certainty. Just a few more days, he told himself. Then I'll tell her everything. But time, as it often did, was running out faster than he knew. And in the shadows, enemies moved closer. The Night of Accord had always been a performance, a carefully orchestrated display of unity designed to placate ambitious nobles and remind the mortal world that vampires could be civilized when it suited them. Tonight, Valtor Castle blazed with light. Chandeliers dripping with crystals illuminated the grand hall where nobles mingled in formal attire, their pale faces beautiful and cold as carved marble. Human dignitaries, carefully selected and thoroughly vetted, moved nervously among them, clutching wine glasses like shields. Lucian stood at the head of the hall, crowned and imposing, accepting shallow pleasantries from council members who smiled while calculating his downfall. High above, on a private balcony concealed by gauzy curtains, Alara and Mira watched. Mira wore a gown of deep burgundy velvet that some kind-hearted maid had altered to fit her small frame. Her hair had been braided with silver ribbon. She looked like a little princess, her eyes wide with wonder at the spectacle below. Alara wore something far more unsettling, a gown of midnight blue silk that had belonged to someone long dead, its cut elegant and simple, its fabric whispering against her skin like secrets. She felt exposed despite being covered from neck to wrist. You look beautiful, Mama, Mira whispered. I look like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life, Alara murmured back. Earlier, before the celebration began, Lucian had come to their suite. He'd stopped in the doorway when he saw Alara, something flickering in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. "The dress suits you," he'd said quietly. "It belonged to someone else." She would have been honored. He'd stepped closer, producing a delicate silver necklace from his pocket, a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. "May I?" Alara nodded, too nervous to speak. Lucian moved behind her, his cool fingers brushing the nape of her neck as he fastened the clasp. The proximity made her breath catch. She could feel the controlled power radiating from him, cold and vast as an ocean held behind glass. "Thank you," she'd whispered, "for everything, for protecting us, for—" "Don't thank me yet," he'd interrupted, his voice rough. "The night isn't over." Their eyes had met in the mirror. For a heartbeat, something passed between them. Recognition, attraction, fear. Lucian's gaze had dropped to her lips, lingered there a moment too long. Then he'd stepped back, the moment broken. "Stay on the balcony. Don't leave for any reason. Ravik and Solon will be stationed at the stairway. You're expecting trouble. I'm always expecting trouble." Now, watching him move through the crowd below with perfect royal composure, Alara realized something that terrified her. She no longer saw him as simply a monster or a king. She saw a man carrying impossible burdens, making impossible choices, protecting them at great cost to himself. She was starting to care about him. And that was dangerous. The attack came without warning. One moment, the celebration hummed with polite conversation and orchestral music. The next, the ancient wards protecting the castle flared brilliant crimson, crackling with broken magic. Then the windows exploded inward. Glass rained down in glittering cascades. Masked figures poured through the shattered openings. Vampires moving with inhuman speed, human mercenaries armed with silver weapons and hexed blades. They descended on the crowd like wolves on sheep. Screams erupted. Nobles scattered. A chandelier crashed to the floor, scattering crystal shards like diamonds across marble stained with blood. "Mira, get back." Alara grabbed her daughter, pulling her away from the balcony railing. Below, Lucian moved. He was a blur of motion, obsidian cloak billowing as he tore through attackers with terrifying precision. His hand shot out, catching a mercenary's throat and crushing it before the man could scream. He spun, using the body as a shield against crossbow bolts, then hurled it into 3 more assailants. Blood sprayed across his face. His eyes blazed crimson, reflecting the chaos with inhuman beauty. He was magnificent and monstrous in equal measure, every inch the ancient predator humans feared in their darkest nightmares. Ravik and Solon formed a wall at the base of the balcony stairs, blades singing as they cut down anyone who tried to climb. Their movements were synchronized, brutal, efficient. But one attacker slipped through. He came from the side passage, a secret entrance only insiders would know, moving with supernatural speed. Before Alara could react, he was on the balcony, masked and armed, reaching for Mira. No! Alara threw herself between them. The attacker grabbed Mira anyway, one arm locking around her small body while his other hand pressed a silver dagger to her throat. "Surrender," he shouted down to the hall. "Surrender, or the child dies." The fighting paused. All eyes turned upward. Lucian stood frozen in the center of the carnage, blood dripping from his hands, his expression transformed into something absolutely lethal. "Let her go." Each word was a death sentence. "The Rowan child belongs to us," the attacker snarled. "She's worth more than—" Mira screamed. Light exploded from her small body, pure, blinding, searing. The attacker shrieked as his hands burned, flesh smoking where he touched her. But he didn't let go, desperation overriding pain. "Mira." Alara lunged forward, grabbing the attacker's arm, trying to wrench him away from her daughter. The silver dagger flashed. Pain erupted in Alara's side as the blade sank deep between her ribs. She gasped, stumbling, blood soaking through the blue silk. "Mama." Lucian moved faster than thought itself. He reached the balcony in a single impossible leap, landing with inhuman grace. One hand seized the attacker's skull and twisted. The crack of breaking bone echoed like thunder. The body crumpled. But Alara was falling. Lucian caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her gently as blood poured from the wound. Her face was already pale, lips losing color. Her breathing came in shallow, desperate gasps. "Alara," he said, his voice cracking. "Stay with me." "Mira," she whispered. "Keep her safe." "I will. I swear it. But you need to stay." Her eyes fluttered closed.
No. No.
Lucian stared at the blood pooling beneath her, at the wound too deep to heal naturally, at the life draining from her with every heartbeat. He had seconds. Maybe less. He'd sworn never to do this again. Swore after the last time, after watching someone he loved transform into something neither living nor dead, that he would never bind another soul to his cursed existence. But he couldn't let her die. "Forgive me," he whispered. He lowered his mouth to her throat and bit. Her blood flooded his senses. Ancient power, hidden magic, sweetness and suffering intertwined. It sang in his veins, called to something primal and hungry within him. He drew deeply, feeding her life back to himself, then reversing the flow, pouring his own immortal essence into her dying body. The bond formed instantly, snapping into place like chains forged in eternity. Mine, something in him growled. Mine to protect. Mine to keep. He could feel her heartbeat synchronizing with his. Feel her pain becoming his pain. Feel the boundary between them dissolving.
More.
He needed more. Just a little more. "Your Majesty." Ravik's voice cut through the haze.
Stop.
"You'll kill her." Lucian ripped himself away with a snarl of pure agony, fangs tearing free, blood on his lips. He was shaking, fighting the frenzy, barely holding on to sanity. Beneath him, Alara's eyes fluttered open, and they glowed. Faint, golden, like sunlight through honey. Her wound began to close, flesh knitting together with unnatural speed. Color returned to her cheeks. She drew a deep, shuddering breath. She was alive.
Changed but alive.
"Mama." Mira threw herself against Alara, sobbing. "You're okay. You're okay." Alara's arms closed around her daughter automatically, but her gaze remained locked on Lucian. Confusion. Fear. Something else she couldn't name. "What did you do?" she whispered. Lucian stood slowly, blood dripping from his chin, his hands trembling. Around them, the battle was ending. Reinforcements had arrived. Invaders were being cut down or fleeing through broken windows. But Lord Darius was nowhere to be found. "I saved you," Lucian said hoarsely, "and damned us both in the process." The castle floor glittered with broken glass and pooled blood. Bodies lay scattered like discarded dolls. And in the center of it all, the vampire king stood with a mortal woman who was no longer entirely mortal, while a child of prophecy clung to them both. The night had shattered more than just glass. It had shattered every certainty Lucian had built his existence upon. And somewhere in the darkness, enemies regrouped, having learned exactly how valuable the Rowan pair truly were. Alara woke to a world that had become unbearably loud. Every sound crashed through her consciousness with crystalline clarity, the rustle of silk sheets amplified to roaring waves, distant footsteps echoing like thunder through stone corridors, whispered conversations 3 rooms away, as clear as if spoken directly into her ear. She could hear hearts beating, dozens of them, hundreds, each pulse a distinct rhythm forming an overwhelming symphony. She pressed her palms against her ears, gasping. It didn't help. "Breathe." Lucian's voice cut through the chaos, low and steady. "Focus on my voice. Let the rest fade to background." Alara's eyes snapped open, and the world exploded into impossible detail. She could see individual dust motes dancing in lamplight 20 feet away. The grain of wood in the ceiling beams. Stars visible through the window despite the pre-dawn darkness, each one sharp and brilliant as diamonds. "What did you do to me?" Her voice trembled with fury and fear in equal measure. Lucian sat in a chair beside her bed, still wearing his blood-stained formal attire from the attack. He looked exhausted, something she'd never seen in him before. "I saved your life. The wound was fatal. You would have bled out in minutes. By drinking from me." The words came out harsh, accusing. Without asking, without giving me a choice. There was no time for choices. There's always time for consent. Alara sat up, and the movement was too fast, too fluid. She was beside the window before she'd consciously decided to move. The speed terrified her. "What am I now?" "Not a vampire," Lucian said carefully. "The bond didn't complete fully. I stopped before the transformation could finish. You're something else. Bloodbound.
Connected to me.
Enhanced, but still mortal." Alara stared at her hands, watching veins pulse with faint golden light beneath her skin. The Rowan sigils had grown brighter, spreading further up her arms. "Connected how?" "I can feel you now. Your emotions.
Your pain."
If you're in danger, I'll know."
He paused.
"And you can feel me too, if you let yourself." She tested it cautiously, reaching out with senses she didn't understand. And there he was, a vast presence at the edge of her consciousness. Cold and ancient, yes, but also lonely, burdened, afraid. "You had no right," she whispered, even as traitorous gratitude welled up inside her. She was alive. Mira still had a mother. "I know." Lucian's voice was rough with guilt. "But I would do it again." Before Alara could respond, Mira stirred in the smaller bed nearby, making the argument dissolve into maternal instinct. Alara was at her daughter's side instantly, smoothing back blonde hair, checking for injuries that weren't there. "Mama?" Myra's eyes opened slowly. "You're okay now. The king saved you." "Yes." Alara managed her throat tight. "I'm okay." But nothing would ever be okay again. Hours later, when Mira had been fed and settled with Solon standing guard, Lucian led Alara deep into the castle's forgotten levels. They descended spiral stairs carved centuries ago, passing through corridors where torches burned with permanent flames. Finally, they entered a chamber Alara suspected few living souls had seen. The Hall of Remembrance. Murals covered every surface, walls, ceiling, even parts of the floor, depicting battles, ceremonies, and figures rendered in stunning detail. But it was the largest mural that made Alara stop, her enhanced vision drinking in every brushstroke. A human woman stood beside a vampire king, her hands glowing with golden light. Around them, darkness retreated. Above them, stars formed patterns that seemed almost alive. "The first Rowan," Lucian said quietly. "She was a seer who warned my ancestor of a plague that would have destroyed both mortal and vampire populations. In gratitude, he bound her family to the throne, not as servants, but as advisors, protectors of balance." Alara traced the painted woman's face with her eyes. The resemblance was unsettling. What happened to them? They grew too powerful. Some vampires feared what they represented, the idea that mortals could hold influence over immortal affairs. 3 centuries ago, a faction of nobles orchestrated their extermination. Entire bloodline, wiped out in a single night. His voice hardened. "Or so we believed." "My mother," Alara breathed. "She must have been a survivor.
Hidden.
Probably the last." Lucian moved to another section of the mural, pointing to a smaller figure, a child wreathed in light. The prophecy spoke of a light-bearer who would be born when darkness threatened to consume everything. A child of Rowan blood whose power could either purge corruption or bring ruin if twisted to serve evil. Alara's blood ran cold. "Mira." "Yes. That's why they've been hunting us." Horror and rage warred in her voice. "Not for money. For her. Because she's some kind of weapon they want to control. Or destroy, if they can't control her." Lucian's jaw tightened. "The attack tonight wasn't random. Someone on the council betrayed your location. Someone wants Mira badly enough to risk open war." Alara turned on him, emotions boiling over. "This isn't fair. She's 6 years old. She should be playing with dolls and learning to read, not hiding from monsters who want to use her for prophecies and power. Tears streamed down her face. We never asked for this. We were just trying to survive, and now you're telling me my daughter is some kind of magical savior? That people will hunt her forever? Yes, Lucian said simply. Brutally honest. They will. But with training, Mira can learn to control her abilities, to protect herself. Training from whom? You. There are others. A witch who owes me favors. A retired seer living in the Northern Territories. Allies who would help, if asked. Alara wanted to scream, wanted to grab Mira and run as far as her new impossible speed could carry them. But where would they go? Lucian had told her the truth. Danger had been stalking them long before they'd stumbled into that alley. At least here, they had walls.
Guards.
A monster powerful enough to fight other monsters. If I stay, she said slowly, if we accept this, what does that make us? Your prisoners? Your pets? My charges, Lucian corrected, under my protection, which means anyone who threatens you threatens me directly. That's not exactly reassuring. It should be, because I won't lose what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened her. Instead, it kindled something warm and dangerous in her chest. The High Council convened at sunset, summoned by emergency protocol. This time, Lucian arrived flanked by armed guards, a deliberate show of force. Lord Darius was conspicuously absent. We demand answers, Lady Corvina rasped. The castle was breached. Nobles murdered, and yet the mortal woman and her aberrant child remain under your roof. They remain because I will, Lucian said coldly. They represent a threat to the entire vampire nation. Lord Theron slammed his fist against his throne's armrest. The child's power is unstable. She could destroy us all in a single uncontrolled burst. The woman is bloodbound to you, a security risk of the highest order. The only security risk, Lucian said softly, dangerously, comes from whichever council member betrayed our wards to last night's attackers. Shocked silence. You accuse us, Lady Corvina began. I accuse no one, Lucian interrupted.
Yet.
But Lord Darius remains absent despite mandatory summons. Interesting, don't you think? Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Regardless of internal treachery, Lord Theron pressed, the Rowan woman and the light bearer must be relocated to a neutral fortress where they can be properly contained.
No.
The single word dropped like a stone into still water. No. Lady Corvina's milky eyes widened. Your Majesty, this isn't a request. The council demands. I don't care what the council demands. Lucian's voice cut like a blade. Alara and Mira are under my personal protection. Anyone who attempts to remove them from this castle will be treated as an enemy of the throne. Am I clear? The temperature plummeted. Several council members half rose from their seats, faces twisted with shock and fury. You would risk civil war, Lord Theron breathed. For two mortals? I would risk far more than that. In the hidden alcove above the council chamber, accessible only through secret passages, Alara listened to every word. Her new hearing picked up the rage in the council's voices, the steel in Lucian's defiance. He was gambling everything. His reign.
His authority.
Perhaps his life.
For them.
For her. She pressed her hand against the cold stone wall, feeling her heartbeat synchronize with his through the blood bond, steady, fierce, unbreakable. And for the first time since waking in this impossible place, Alara made a choice. She wouldn't run. She would fight. The underground chapel reeked of old blood and older magic. Ravik moved through shadows like death itself, Solon flanking him as they descended into the forgotten catacomb beneath Blackmoor's oldest quarter. They tracked Lord Darius for 3 days through a network of informants and bribed contacts, following breadcrumbs of gold and whispered meetings. Now they'd found him. Through a gap in the ancient stonework, they watched Darius negotiate with figures cloaked in red, the rogue coven's leadership, their faces hidden behind ceremonial masks depicting predatory beasts. The light bearer will be worth 10 times what we agreed, one rasped. Her power, properly harvested, could fuel blood rituals for decades. Then take her, Darius said dismissively. Just ensure the king is discredited in the process. I want his throne, not his leftovers. Ravik's hand tightened on his blade. Beside him, Salan's eyes blazed crimson with barely controlled rage. They retreated silently, melting back through the catacombs to where Lucian waited with 6 of his most trusted night guards, warriors who'd served him for centuries, whose loyalty was absolute. Darius? Lucian asked quietly. Confirmed, Ravik said. Negotiating terms with a coven.
They want Mira.
He wants her crown. Lucian's expression went flat, empty, the terrifying calm before a storm. Then let's give them both an ending they won't forget. They struck without warning. Lucian crashed through the chapel's rotted door with inhuman force, splinters exploding inward. His guards poured in behind him, blades singing as they engaged the coven members who scrambled for weapons. Lord Darius spun, genuine shock flashing across his face before his politician's mask slammed back into place. Your Majesty, what an unexpected pleasure. Treason, Lucian said softly, advancing. Conspiracy. Attempted murder of those under my protection. Should I continue? You're a fool, Lucian. Darius drew his sword, an ancient blade etched with dark runes. Blinded by sentiment for mortals who will die in a heartbeat while you live forever. You've grown weak. Weakness, Lucian replied, would be allowing ambition to poison what I've built. Weakness would be sacrificing a child to placate cowards like you. They clashed. The duel was brutal, ancient. 2 vampires whose skills had been honed over centuries, each movement precise and lethal. Blades sparked against stone as they fought through the chapel, destroying pews and shattering stained glass. She's just a mortal, Darius snarled, forcing Lucian back. A temporary distraction. You would risk civil war for someone who'll be dust in 50 years. Lucian's blade found an opening, carving through Darius's guard to slice deep across his chest. I would risk everything for what I'd choose to protect. That's not a weakness, Darius. That's the purpose. Around them, the battle turned. Lucian's guards systematically dismantled the coven members, centuries of training overwhelming desperate ambition. Bodies fell. Screams echoed through ancient stone. Darius stumbled, blood pouring from multiple wounds. His eyes burned with hatred. You'll regret this. Others will come. She's too valuable. The prophecy. The prophecy, Lucian interrupted, pressing his blade against Darius's throat, says nothing about who protects the light bearer. Only that she'll choose light or darkness when the time comes. He leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. I intend to ensure she chooses wisely. One swift motion. Silence. Lucian stood over the body, breathing hard, covered in blood that wasn't his own. Around him, his guards finished securing the chapel. The immediate threat was ended. But the weight of what he'd done, killing a council member, however justified, would have consequences that rippled for years. He didn't care. Dawn was breaking when Lucian returned to the castle, moving slowly through exhaustion and injury. A coven member's blade had caught him across the ribs, not fatal, but painful. His formal coat was ruined, hanging in shredded tatters. He'd barely entered the courtyard when small footsteps pounded across stone. Lucian. Mira ran to him, arms outstretched, tears streaming down her face. She crashed into his legs, hugging him fiercely, sobbing. You're back. You're okay. Mama said you might not come back, but I knew you would because you promised, and you always keep your promises. Something inside Lucian's chest cracked open. He knelt slowly, ignoring the pain, and gathered the child into his arms. She wrapped around him like a lifeline, her small body shaking with relief. Golden light flickered around her hands where they clutched his shoulders, unconscious, harmless, beautiful. I'm here, he murmured against her hair. I'm here, little one. Alara appeared in the doorway, still wearing her nightgown, her face pale with worry. When she saw them, saw Lucian holding Mira, both of them alive, her knees nearly buckled with relief. She crossed the courtyard quickly, her new speed making the movement fluid. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing. Come inside." In the guest suite, their suite now, he supposed, Alara made him sit while she fetched medical supplies. Her enhanced senses guided her hands as she cleaned and bandaged his wounds with surprising competence, her touch gentle despite the anger still simmering beneath her gratitude. "You could have died," she said quietly, fingers pressing gauze against his ribs. "But I didn't." "That's not the point." "What is the point, Alara?" She looked up, meeting his eyes, her own shimmering with unshed tears. "The point is that you matter. Not just as a king, but as someone who carried us from an alley when you had no reason to care. Someone who tells my daughter stories and keeps his promises and risks everything to protect us." Her voice cracked. "You matter to me, to us." Lucian stared at her, something vast and terrifying stirring in his chest. "I meant to help for one night. Take you somewhere safe, then forget." He caught her hand, holding it against his chest where his heart beat slowly and cold. "But I couldn't forget. Couldn't let go. Every time I tried to convince myself you were just another mortal, just another responsibility, I failed." "Good," Alara whispered. "Because I don't see a monster anymore, Lucian. I see the man who saved my daughter's mother, who defied his entire council, who chose us when it cost him everything." Their faces were inches apart. His hand came up, cupping her cheek, thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I'm still dangerous," he warned.
Still what I am.
"The blood bond ties you to centuries of darkness. Then we'll face it together." He kissed her. It was gentle despite everything, despite blood and violence, and impossible circumstances. Her lips were warm against his cold ones, her heartbeat thundering through the bond they shared. When they finally pulled apart, both were shaking. "What happens now?" Alara asked. "Now," Lucian said slowly, thinking through possibilities, "we rebuild. You learn about your heritage, what it means to be Rowan. Mira trains to control her light. And together, we show this city that humans and vampires can be more than predator and prey." "An ambassador?" Alara's lips curved into a tentative smile. "Me? Who is better? You've already conquered a vampire king." She laughed, genuine, surprised, beautiful. 2 weeks later, rain fell over Blackmoor again, but gentler now. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and cool. From the balcony of their suite, Lucian watched the city lights reflect in puddles below. Alara stood beside him, wrapped in one of his cloaks against the chill, her hand resting comfortably in his. Inside, Mira slept peacefully under warm blankets, her teddy bear tucked close. As they watched, a small sphere of soft golden light rose from her sleeping form, drifting lazily upward to float near the ceiling. It cast the room in gentle warmth, driving back shadows without violence. Lucian stepped into the doorway, studying the child who'd changed everything. He remembered finding her in that alley, desperate, terrified, clinging to hope despite every reason to despair. She'd grabbed his cloak and pulled him into a fate he hadn't known he needed. "She's extraordinary," Alara murmured beside him. "She's yours," Lucian replied. "That makes her precious beyond measure." They stood together in the quiet, watching over the sleeping light-bearer, a vampire king and a blood-bound Rowan, guardians of something infinitely fragile and infinitely powerful. The prophecy had spoken of light and darkness, of choices yet to come. But tonight, there was only this, a family forged in storm and shadow, holding fast against whatever tomorrow might bring. And in the heart of the ancient castle, where darkness had reigned for centuries, a child's light burned steady and true, protected not by prophecy or politics, but by something simpler and far more powerful: love.